Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Eva Therapeutic Well-Being. I'm Eva Dawson. I'm an occupational therapist, and I have a video request today, and I had a client reach out to me and ask if I would do a video on sexuality and libido. And so I thought I would talk today. I think this is a really important conversation to have. I think that a lot of people, practitioners, people just don't feel comfortable talking about sexuality, and I don't have any problem with talking about it. It's in my scope of practice. This is something that I've worked with clients for years and years, starting back when I, in my second level 2, working with spinal cord injury rehab patients. A lot of times they were young men, and with a spinal cord injury, a lot of times there is significant impact to erectile function. And so even at a in my early career, where I was having to work with clients with those issues. And I really feel like as an occupational therapist, this is one area that we really need to step up and help people with, because it's a huge part of who we are as human beings. And I think the more we talk about it and the more we address these things, the more people will be happy, because sexuality is such a huge component to helping us be human. So I wanted to talk in particular today about libido and stress. So a lot of my videos are going to be based around how stress impacts our functioning, and especially the men. I want you to pay attention to this video, and you probably will, because it will be titled something about sex, so I'm sure that will pique your interest. But I think it's super important that men really pay attention to this video, because there is biological things happening to women in our society today that are very impactful to our hormones and why we have no libido. And so I really want you to listen to this video, because I think it's very important that you pay attention, because there are things that you can do to help your spouse, your partner, your wife have more interest in sex. So I'll just start by talking about what happens, the cascade of hormone changes that happen to a woman when they're under repeated stress. And so remember, in the beginning of your relationship, when you had lots of desire and you wanted to be with your partner all the time, typically in the beginning of a relationship, there's very little stress. You were much younger, it was before kids, things like that. Today in our society, there is extremely high expectations on women, and women have had to do a lot of biological change that men, and I'm not saying this to be sexist, I'm saying this is from a biological perspective. So if you kind of think back to a tribal setting, men were generally in charge of keeping the perimeter safe around the tribe. They were generally the ones that were out running, hunting, fighting. Generally speaking, that's biologically how men have evolved over time. Women, biologically, we were in our nest, in our home. We were taking care of more of the household, the garden. We were making blankets, taking care of children, doing the medicinal work, things like that. And so our lives were generally pretty stress-free. Men's job were to keep us from feeling stressed or unsafe. And when women feel unsafe, it literally shuts down our sexuality. And there's a significant biological drive for that. And when people kind of understand that, it seems just like common sense. So when the tribe becomes under stress, what happens is men's bodies release adrenaline, and that's what allows that. I've talked about this in another video. Adrenaline brings blood flow to the lungs, to the heart, to the muscles. That allows you to run faster, react faster. And biologically speaking, that would be very good for men that were fighting a battle or having to stay up late to keep the tribe safe, etc. So for women, this is what happens. This is the cascade of hormonal reaction that happens when a woman is under stress. So if there's a perceived stress in the environment, a woman's body releases cortisol and adrenaline. And adrenaline in a woman's body works very differently than it does in a man's body. So adrenaline in a woman's body is a perceived threat. What happens is, biologically, her body starts using the precursor hormones that make our fertility hormones like estrogen and progesterone. Our precursor hormones are then used to make adrenaline and cortisol instead of progesterone. So progesterone is not a survival hormone. Cortisol and adrenaline are. And so those come first, and literally our brain shuts down. Adrenaline is here, cortisol is here, progesterone's way down on the list. And so our bodies start making adrenaline and cortisol to keep us safe, and that's primarily for survival. And so what happens is that progesterone starts to dip, and our body starts to shut down our reproductive system. So why would somebody's body do that? Well, if the tribe is under stress, do you think that the tribe would want another mouth to feed? Probably not. And so it's actually a biological birth control. And how many people do you know that have had fertility problems, that are under a significant amount of stress? They probably work 40 hours a week. They're worried about fertility. They're trying to do all these tests, everything like that, going to all these doctor's appointments, and they can't get pregnant. And then how many people do you know they adopt a child or they give up, and then what happens? They get pregnant. So this is when the body is alleviated of stress, and when that stress is gone, that frees up that progesterone, which allows the body to balance out its hormones. So without progesterone, what happens is estrogen starts to raise, and estrogen becomes dominant. You probably heard of estrogen dominance. That throws off your period. You become very irritable, lots of breast swelling, heavy periods, lots of moodiness. That's another kind of a shutdown of relationship. That moodiness, that lack of desire to have intercourse, that all comes from that high levels of estrogen. Basically, like your body is in a suspended state somewhat of pregnancy. And so also the cortisol hormone, which is raised during times of stress, is a store hormone. So our body kind of go into store mode, and we start to store fat. And that is another, obviously women, we have lots of body issues, and we worry about the way our body looks. And a lot of women who are under a significant amount of stress, it's very difficult for them to lose weight, which is another barrier to sexuality when women don't feel comfortable with their body. So men, what can you do to alleviate your wife's stress? Like I said, we no longer live in a tribal setting. Women, like I said before, they typically had a very more stress-free environment. And now we take care of the kids. We do all the, I'm not trying to be sexist, I'm just saying in general, women have a lot of responsibilities on their plate. We have full-time jobs now. This has been going on for generations. We have full-time jobs. We drop our kids off at daycare. You know, we have a baby, and 8 weeks later we're dropping our baby off to another person, and we go to work and act like we don't have kids, and then we come home and act like we don't have a job. So our brains are constantly being pulled in a million different directions, and we're expected to not act like a mom at our job, and when we're at home we're supposed to act like we don't have a job. And men, generally, they kind of get off the hook with this. They have like a lot less responsibilities as far as like childcare. If your child is sick, it's typically the mom that's expected to take off work. And I'm making generalizations here, so I don't want to offend anybody, but this is reality, and it's impossible for women's bodies to keep up with the constant state that we live in, constant go. This is perpetually putting our bodies into states of stress, which is dipping and causing a huge lack of progesterone in our bodies. I see women like this every single day that have low progesterone. So their desire to be intimate is probably the last thing on their mind. So like I said before, if a woman does not feel safe, if a woman feels stressed, it's very difficult for her body to be open and available for intercourse. Women are very much in our brains, and so we're constantly thinking about the things that we need to do, especially if we're in a state of stress. So we have this like list, this perpetual list of things to do in our brains. And sex is on that list, and it's usually one of the last things to check off on the list. So I am speaking to men here. I ask you to in a very loving way, ask your partner what you can do to take some things off of your wife's list. that will hopefully free up some of her time so that she can be more available to you for intercourse. So I strongly feel that sex is a huge part of a relationship, and when there isn't intimacy and there isn't sex, there's a breakdown in the marriage. And so it should be a priority, and when we have little kids and things like that at home, it doesn't become a priority, and my patients' relationships suffer because of this. And so this is a very focused discussion that I have with many of my clients, working on trying to make it more of a priority in your relationship. So I talk to women about taking the mindset of having it be as important in your relationship as, say, prayer or good nourishment. It is just as important. And so I give women strategies on how to relax their body, the importance of foreplay, not doing not just let's just get it over with kind of mentality, because women tend to do that. We say, okay, just get it over with. And that you're cheating yourself out of a really good experience that allows your brain to relax, that allows your body to relax, that allows those endorphin releases. And we just do it because we're stressed and we think our partner is just wanting us, oh, you just want me for sex and then you're done with me. But from a male perspective, men are biologically driven very physically. So men are typically very much in their body, and they're just coming from a desire component. And also their brains need oxytocin release, which is a bonding chemical. And men rarely get to experience oxytocin release except for with orgasm. And oxytocin is a brain chemical that pair bonds us. And without that chemical release, men start to feel very withdrawn from us. They start to feel very like they're not important to us. And it's really funny when I talk to clients, the woman will say, well, he's so much nicer to me after we have intercourse, and if he would just be nice to me before, then maybe I'd want to do it. And see, this is where communication, I call this like a gridlock. The woman feels like that's all they want. They just want them for sex, and why wouldn't they just be nice to me before? But the man's over here going, my brain has no oxytocin and I need oxytocin, and I just want to be with you. And then when you're together afterwards, he feels nicer because he has oxytocin in his brain. So if we would just look at it differently and say, oh, he's being grumpy and he is wanting me because he needs oxytocin in his brain, instead of thinking that he's a jerk and just wants me for sex and he should just help me around the house. So it's all about communication, and it's all about our hormones and how our hormones affect the way we interact. And so I really talk with couples about looking at each other differently and looking at each other's behavior differently. And so men, I encourage you to talk to your spouse, your loved one, your wife, about how you can relieve some pressure and stress off of her. And I can guarantee you, if you help to check off her list and you step up and you start taking initiative to be head of the household, to do things around the house, take kids to appointments, do the things that you need to do to take some pressure off your wife. And if women, you take an initiative to be more connected with your husband, then the relationship just works so much better. So if you'd like to talk to me further about progesterone, lack of progesterone or estrogen dominance, or how to balance your hormones, or more on couples, working with couples is one of my favorite things to do. So if you're having any of those issues or concerns, I would love to talk to you further about these things. I have information below on how to reach out to me. And then I also would love if you would check out, I'm going to put a link to a TED Talk called The Sex Starved Marriage, which I have my patients watch all the time. So I will put a link to that below. It's just a really good TED Talk on communication breakdown and the importance of continuation of intimacy in a relationship. So I'll put a link to that below. And if you have any other further questions, just feel free to reach out and ask. And I'd love if you would please subscribe and like my my YouTube channel and share with your friends. Thank you so much for joining me today.